we are very happy now to have a very interesting conversation about all of the goings-on, I guess you could say, in the world, and what the stars have to do with and how they influence us here on Earth today. And we are now joined by Margot Saffer, who is an astrologer and a psychotherapist. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you.
I think you can feel it as I can feel it as the someone who likes to pay attention to this stuff. How would you explain all of the, I guess we could call it unrest, but if you look at it on the other side of the coin, in a way it's revolutionary energy. If you could kind of explain first this huge transition of Pluto going into Aquarius just last week, and why this is the beginning of a new age.
Right, so there are many things to say about this. One of the things being that we speak so much about what the age of Aquarius might mean. And anything kind of moving in that direction is heralding what that can be. Aquarius, so how astrology works is there's planetary movements and there are the zodiac signs that we all know. So it's talking about just parts of the sky that have been dedicated to each sign. And when planets move, it's all from our perspective on Earth. So it's also for us to remember that, and to remember that we're as above, so below. So as we see planets moving, as astrologers have done, like scientists, watching the stars for thousands of years and noticing what's happening above us and noticing correlations happening on Earth. So if we take into consideration Pluto, which is what Pluto's movement, Pluto moves into Aquarius in the 23rd of March, so not very long ago. And why this is a big deal is Pluto, I still take it as a planet, even though it's been demoted, and there are various reasons for that. You can ask anytime.
Conversation, yeah.
But Pluto is the farthest reaching planet, and it's got an elliptic orbit. That's one of the reasons why it's not considered a planet. But why I'm mentioning that is it's got different times that it spends in each of the signs. So it went into the sign before, which was Capricorn, in 2008. So when Pluto, you can see when Pluto moves into various signs that it makes for a big change. In 2008, we saw the stock market crash. We saw a change in leaderships, like a change in the idea of leaderships, like Obama was elected during that time. The time it moved before that into the sign before was in 1996 when Rabin was assassinated. So here we see it shifting, and it's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years now. And when it shifts, this makes for a shift in the terms of our perspective. And Pluto is the planet of transformation. So it has brought about transformation in 2008. The transformations that we've been looking at for the last 15 years or so should have been regarding structures and systems, and now we're seeing shifts regarding society and how we operate within society, and how we see ourselves as responsible for ourselves and for each other within society. So what we're going to be seeing more of in this time is societies based on coming together rather than a top-down hierarchical society, but rather based on shared groups with shared ideals and goals coming together to create society. And so this is a time when we can see, the main thing about Aquarius as well is to look at the future. And what is it that we envision for a future? What is a utopia for you? What's a utopia for me? And often those don't necessarily coincide. And so this is something that we're seeing around the world now, is can my ideal future be respectful and accepting of your ideal future, and how is it that we can do that together?
And also, in a way, focusing people on looking at others as human beings. So we're also seeing this polarization, but once we are able to appreciate one another from a human perspective, maybe that could also lead to a change rather than a judgment and the polarization and the Capricorn energy of who has the power, who holds the power, economics as well. Like, it's going to force people to see each other eye to eye.
The things that we don't want to see in each other and in ourselves, mainly. And that brings up the stuff from the unconscious. And so it brings up the things that are, it brings to attention the things that are ruling us, that are ruling our leaders as well, the parts that they perhaps don't even know about themselves. So to also see our leaders as people is a really important
and being held
aspect.
accountable, as we've been seeing for the past several weeks with the leader here in Israel. We're going to take a short break and continue this conversation. Thank you very much for shedding your insight, and we're going to be back with more with Margot Saffer after the break. Stay tuned. Emily Francis, we're back with more with Margot Saffer, an astrologer, psychotherapist, as well as a writer. And before the break, we were talking about this whole Pluto switching into Aquarius. And one thing I guess I want to continue on is we know throughout history that when Pluto returns have happened, it's really led to the destruction of many empires throughout the course of history. The United States going through its Pluto return. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the founding of the United States.
Right, so this is what I wanted to say is the things that Pluto didn't want to, the things that we don't want to talk about regarding Pluto is, one of that is death and decay and definitely a shift in power. And again, that's also within ourselves as it is that we see outside of ourselves. And so when you say, destruction of, but it's also an evolution of, and I think it's nicer to see it in those terms. So yes, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, because it's so slow moving, it was between 1778 and 1798. And in that time, we saw the American Bill of Rights being written. We saw the Virginia being the first state to abolish slavery, Denmark being the first country to stop the sale of humans. So there's a humanitarian aspect to Aquarius that is really important to focus on. And also the French Revolution, based on the tenets of freedom, liberty, and fraternity. And the time before that, in the 1500s, when Pluto was there, is when Copernicus stopped taught us that Earth isn't the center of.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. I do know a lot about this.
So it's a perspective, a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And so I think for the next year, we'll see this kind of bottom-up, top-down cycle and fight. And for us to know for ourselves, if the people are wanting, to come up from below, as we've seen in history at this time, is what is it that we want, and if we were to create a structure of leadership, what would it look like that's different from what we've seen before? And I think the biggest message always, as I say, with as above so below, is how is it that we can use these revolutionary energies, these energies of unconscious forces, or looking at power, looking at change within ourselves.
Also, we just recently had the spring equinox. We're going to have a full moon on Passover. We know this is in history, it is really the beginning of the year when you're looking at the astrology.
Absolutely,
it's not September, it's not January 1st. So with everything that's going on, this is a very impactful year. What's different astrologically on this full moon, which is always the case at the beginning of Passover?
Right, so the Passover full moon is most usually, it's an Aries Libra full moon. So I'm saying that in the sense the idea of opposites attract comes from astrology. And with the full moon, it means the full light is shone onto something. And we had the equinox, which always brings the beginning of the astrological new year. It's the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere. And then the full moon following that is usually the Aries full moon, and then even Easter is the Sunday following the full moon, following the equinox. And so we can think about it, for those, during this week that we'd be having Passover and Pesach, that it's the Aries Libra is ourself, and so there's also the correlation of the Jewish nation coming into a sense of identity, and I think that's what we can be looking at in this country, is a sense of we're going through an identity crisis, and yet with that, the Libra is asking us to look at the other and to recognize,
to be diplomatic,
ourselves in the other, and to see that love, and to see that they're looking for themselves in us. And that's something that we can be focusing on, I think.
As we each individually, you look at Passover as not just a story that happened, at Mount Sinai. It's actually our own slavery, where we're every year supposed to look at where are we enslaved with our own ego, our own patterns. So it's also
the relationships that we might want to let go of, and the relationships that we might want to create. But and also to kind of see Aries as a kind of starting again. You know, even though we know that it's been
Impulsive.
difficult and everything, we start again with courage.
Yeah.
And and maybe a little bit of stupidity, but we kind of have to if we're starting something.
Yeah. Right. One other thing I want to say before we go and make it quick, because I think it's worth noting, it's more short term, but we've had this whole situation with Mars in Gemini for a ridiculously long period of time. It's been really chaotic, but now it's also gone into Cancer, which is interesting timing with what's happening here in Israel. It's also making people really look at love of their own country. Like, we're seeing a triumph of the spirit in the streets. People that wouldn't normally protest are out there because it's like, let's take back this country. What do we love about this country? Or what other country is
Cancer
going
representing our home, and also representing our emotional state as well. It's important to take that into consideration. And and interestingly to see that the Mars being both the will and the warrior and the defender, and so the defender of the state. That's been an interesting play in the last couple of weeks in the news in Israel, and then again, exactly as you're saying, that we're that willing to fight for what it means to feel safe at home, and what is it that we want to have in our homes? Mars being in Gemini has been about communication, and there's been a lot of fights in that regard. And now the kind of fight, it'll be kind of on home soil.
Now we have to fight for peace and for love for one another.
But the thing with Aquarius that I think I want to just perhaps end with this is it's an air sign, so it can have the tendency to be kind of cold and calculated and technological, and it's really important during this time, and to keep remembering and to be respecting in other people, is our sense of our bodies and our emotional power. So to be reminded constantly of what are we feeling here, and to give that precedence as well,
and give that be mindful of it.
Be mindful of it.
Margot, thank you so much for that insight, as always, and everyone could go check out more of your work on your Facebook page.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.